New Brunswick. Perhaps you're not familiar with this little province, but it's located among the maritime provinces, which are those that border the Atlantic Ocean on Canada's eastern shore. The maritime provinces are most commonly referred to as Prince Edward Island, Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick. Some people like to include Quebec as an Atlantic province, which part of it is, but most of it isn't. New Brunswick was widely settled by many different groups of people, and these settlements have remained in place to such an extent that New Brunswick is home to the second most rural population in Canada after PEI. One of these populations we're going to discuss today, Rockport. The earliest known settlers were among a group of 13 Baptists who arrived in Slacks Cove, having sailed from Swansea, Massachusetts. They were led by a man named Nathan Mason. It's likely they ended up at this particular spot because Rockport sticks quite far out into the Bay of Fundy, and Rockport would have been a natural spot to look at and say, hey, that's a way easier spot to land than all this other stuff, because there's a nice little cove here. So it might not have been very intentional, but it is the place they ended up. Although many of these settlers returned to Massachusetts in 1771, the congregation would have a new leader named Joseph Crandall beginning in 1798. The Middle Sackville Baptist Church and the Sackville Main Street Baptist Church are the two oldest Baptist churches in all of Canada, both having formed directly from these original settlers in 1763. The name Crandall might sound familiar to you. That's because in August of 2009, the Atlantic Baptist University renamed itself as Crandall University in honor of Joseph Crandall. Beginning in 1864, Rockport would be home to its very own post office. A map in 1862 shows 29 distinct families, a school, a general store, 2 sawmills, and a rock quarry, and 6 kilometers of road. By 1871, it had a population of 100 people. In 1898, Rockport had 200 people in it and featured a seaport, farms, fisheries, lumber sites, and within the village, Oh yeah. Let's go. And within the village, a post office, a store, grindstone quarries, a lighthouse, and a church. Curiously, Rockport, New Brunswick was also home to a post office for North Joggins, Nova Scotia. Now, North Joggins and Rockport don't touch each other at all. In fact, there's 6 kilometers of very treacherous water in between them. And in order to get from Rockport to North Joggins, you have to walk 19 hours worth of beaches or get your own boat because there's no bridge and there's no ferry. Rockport, like many other towns, had a lot of shipbuilding going on in the age of sail. However, the most consistent industry that was available to them was quarrying for sandstone. The government of New Brunswick has the Industrial Minerals Summary Data, and it describes Rockport as follows. The Rockport Quarry operated sporadically from 1815 to 1862, and then again in the 1870s to 1912, serving primarily as a source of grindstone and limited amounts of stone for local buildings. One of the local buildings which features this stone is the Owens Art Gallery in Mount Allison University, which is in Sackville, and the Sackville Railway Station. Anecdotally, quarrying began at Rockport around 1815 under a company owned by Joseph Reed and John T. Seaman. A geologist writing in 1840 termed the material as, quote, the best stones for cutting and polishing the metals ever found in America. During the early 1860s, the Westmoreland Olive Freestone Company quarried sandstone from Rockport for the New England market. The operation had 100 employees, a company store, the foundations of which are still visible today, and a steam derrick, the chimney of which is still visible today. Probably the first ever steam derrick used in Canada. The Minerals Report of New Brunswick notes that the exact locations where these quarries were isn't clear. First-hand accounts are contradictory to each other about where exactly they were. However, there are photos online of unfinished grindstones which have been left on the beaches, which were started but evidently not worth the effort. The Industrial Mineral Report concludes, the Westmoreland Freestone Company quarry at Rockport is marked on an 1862 map, and in 1861, the firm produced 4,000 tons of stone. And yet, in October of 1962, it suffered financial problems that resulted in a tax sale and the cessation of business. Nothing else is recorded from Rockport Quarry until 1871, when it reappears under the direction and perhaps the ownership of the Reeds family, who worked the quarry off and on until 1912. The site today is empty, save for the boiler stack, which you can still see, and the foundations of the company store, which you can also still see. Now, something that's very impressive about the Maritimes is that you'll be passing through these tiny little towns, which hardly even have signs out in front of them. And yet, each town will have a cenotaph in it, with at least several names of soldiers that had gone off to either the First World War, the Second World War, or the Korean War. Now, Rockport itself does not have a cenotaph. However, it did send at least 3 of its sons to World War I. So I'd like to highlight those 3. The first man I'd like to bring up that went to World War I is Clarence Leslie Ward. Leslie was born in 1893, the son of Mariner Ward and Electra Maxwell. Prior to serving in the Army, he was a tailor and had lived in Amherst, Nova Scotia. He's listed as single on his draft papers and put his father, Mariner, the resident of Rockport, as his next of kin. Clarence Ward was drafted on the 1st of March, 1918, to the 85th Battalion of the Nova Scotia Highlanders. He was killed in action on the 6th of November, 1918, in France. He's been interred at the Valenciennes Communal Cemetery. He was killed along with 14 members of his unit in their last engagement of the entire war, which ended several days later on the 11th of November, 1918. The second soldier I'd like to highlight is Parley Hector Ward. He served in the Somme through 1916 and was present for the Battle of Vimy Ridge in 1917. After being injured in Vimy Ridge, he wrote a letter home to his wife, as states, "Dear wife, I suppose you saw where the Canadians figured largely in our recent victories. Well, I happened to be one of the boys that day. I didn't stand it long, for a shrapnel shell burst at my feet and broke my right leg. But the worst of it was that I couldn't get carried out, so I had to stay in a shell hole all day. The explosive made my leg so bad that I had to have it taken off above the knee. But don't worry, I'm a lot better off than some of the poor chaps I see. I have suffered. I hardly believed a person could feel so much pain, but I have not failed. I wish I knew where Arley was. Don't know if he would have been in the drive or not. Hope he wasn't." Now, Parley Ward did make it home safely. He ended up living until the 1950s, eventually passing away in Sackville, New Brunswick. As mentioned in his letter, his brother actually was present for the Battle of Vimy Ridge. His brother was Arlington Dixon Ward. Arlington joined the Army on the 31st of March, 1916. He gave his next of kin as being his sister, Edva. Unfortunately, Arley was not quite as lucky as his brother, who lost a leg, mind you. Arley was killed in action, 9th of April, 1917. Although the location of his remains were never found, he is memorialized in 2 places. He has a dedicated stone in Rockport, New Brunswick, as well as having his name engraved at the Vimy Ridge Memorial in France. On the WikiTrue biography for Arley, the author writes this: "My purpose here is not to debate the battle, but to honor just one life of the 3,598 Canadian soldiers who died over the 4-day battle. Please read that number again, 3,598. This does not include the additional 7,004 compatriots who were wounded in action. There must have been very few people in Canada who were not touched by these losses. To put that into perspective, Canada's population in 1917 was 8,060,000. Thus, approximately 1 out of every 760 Canadians were killed or wounded at Vimy Ridge." So as I just mentioned earlier, there are still actual signs of the sandstone quarries that were present on Rockport. Down in the southeastern corner of the peninsula, there's the Old Chimney hiking trail. So prior to all this footage you had seen before, my wife and I actually went down there to go check out the chimney. And then I was so interested in this chimney that this video ended up being made. So it's a great little trail. The trail itself, super flat, super easy. My two little Pomeranians handled it, no problem whatsoever. So if you're in the area and you want to come out to just kind of a neat spot, see something really unique, this is an absolutely fantastic little trail. So, of course, this is called the Old Chimney Trail. And the reason why it's called that is because there used to be a steam generator up the way here, which powered a derrick. And a derrick is basically just a big old crane. So clearly what was going on was they would quarry all the stone, they'd bring it down to the derrick, lift it up with the derrick, plop it onto a ship. Just that easy. See, as you might have seen in my little screenshot there, the trail is only a little bit over half a kilometer long. So, pretty low commitment. It's a bit of a bumpy road to get down here, but that's all right. It was also fairly rainy on the day that we came here, but there was enough of a tree canopy that we actually stayed pretty dry. Then as you're coming down the trail, you can't miss it, or at least my wife couldn't. Just off to the right-hand side going down the trail is where all the foundation stones for whether this was a company store or whether this was their supply lodges or whatever, there's very clearly used to be a building here. And just in case you happen to think from my earlier voiceover that nothing happened in Rockport after 1918, I'll have you know that a little tiny Piper plane ran out of fuel and then made a gentle crash landing on Rockport. The pilot walked away, everything was fine, but, something happened here in 2021. But then just like that, before you know it, you're treated to a lovely little view. Everything opens up, and then there's the chimney, right there, right-hand side. And then across the water there, you can see the coastline of Nova Scotia. And it's just such a lovely little place. Lots of little cliffs. I've been so lucky that when I went to Dorchester twice last week, I ended up at low tide. And then today when we went to this place, I ended up at low tide. And then when I came back a few days later, I got low tide again. I got no business being this lucky, but just fantastic little beach. And the great thing is, I wouldn't normally recommend having your dog off leash. You can feel how you like about that. I wouldn't usually recommend it, but this is some serious space to let your responsible dog off leash. As you'll see, one of our dogs is less responsible, so he stays on the leash. Rockport isn't very much of a mark today. As you're driving south out of Sackville, there's no welcome to Rockport sign. As you're leaving from Dorchester, there's no, hey, welcome to Rockport, population such and such. Rockport is a very small town. A couple of weeks ago, I made a video discussing how Dorchester, New Brunswick, just 10 kilometers away, was briefly marked for greatness when they tried to build the chemical plant there. However, the chemical plant ended up failing, and Dorchester itself fell back into obscurity aside from being the home to a prison. Now, Rockport never had that second chance. Rockport has just remained what it is this entire time. A rural town in New Brunswick with a very rich history. Hello, audience member. Good to see you. If you're into this sort of thing and you want to get out there for yourself and you happen to live in Prince Edward Island or New Brunswick, I cannot highly recommend enough Hidden New Brunswick and Prince Edward Island. This book, Scott Osmond put out a series of these, absolutely fantastic. If you want to get out there, do a little bit of exploring. Maybe you don't live in New Brunswick or PEI. Maybe you instead live in Nova Scotia, in which case I recommend Hidden Nova Scotia by Scott Osmond. But maybe you don't live in PEI, Nova Scotia, or New Brunswick. Maybe you live in Newfoundland. I'm sorry for your loss. In which case I would recommend Hidden Newfoundland by Scott Osmond. That's a joke about Newfoundland. I'm going sometime. I'm sure it's going to be awesome. It's probably rules. Anyway, I really hope that you're getting out there and enjoying your local area. And speaking of enjoying things, I really enjoy the comment section. I cannot believe how many just wonderful stories are in the comment section. Something or other, it's an amazing variety of comments down there. I really appreciate it. And there's a few weird ones. There's a guy that called me a moron for saying that ice forms in the Bay of Fundy, which it does. I don't know, you should just go look at it sometime. But, you know, there's weirdos out there too. You know, that's cool. That's all part of it. But if you have any stories, if you have any kind of relation to these areas, is there something you want to share, dude? I'm gonna read it because there's not too many comments that I can't keep track of them. Also, if there's a suggestion, right? Like a lot of people in the last video suggested looking into Bricklin auto manufacturing down in St. John. I'm pretty sure that factory's gone, so I'm not sure if I can do a video about that. But there's loads of stuff. And I don't know all of it, because how could a person know all of it? So please, if there's something interesting, especially in southeastern New Brunswick or northwestern Nova Scotia, I'm super down. Shoot me an email. I think I'll have an email address right here. Yeah. And thanks for checking it out. Go out and enjoy your local area there. Have a good time. Do something that you enjoy doing. And if you're interested in getting a motorcycle license, get it, because motorcycles rule.